hip hip, tally-ho, Joolz Guides here, in which I wander around London and tell you fascinating facts.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like the videos.
Now, taxis have been part of London life for over 300 years, and long may it continue. But they weren't always these iconic black taxis that everyone's familiar with. It all started back in Elizabethan times with something called a hackney carriage. Now, a hackney carriage doesn't mean that something that comes from Hackney. It actually comes from the French word acné, which means a worn-out old horse available for hire, in much the same way as you might come down to Fleet Street to hire a journalist, a worn-out old Fleet Street hack. Hyde Park, please. Now, its official name is still a hackney carriage, and by 1654 there were 200 of them after Oliver Cromwell passed this law for the Fellowship of Master Hackney Carriages. There's even a city livery company. I really like this route through Hyde Park, especially on a lovely hot day, but we're lucky to be able to come through here because back in 1694, a gaggle of women was so badly behaved in a hackney carriage that they got them banned from the park for over 200 years. Thank you, driver. Then in 1851, Hyde Park was where they held the Great Exhibition in a big crystal palace. Originally, that crystal palace was here in Hyde Park. And Sir Richard Mayne was very upset about the fact that a lot of taxi drivers who were picking up these people who had all come to the Great Exhibition didn't seem to know their way around London. So he decided, I know, I'm going to introduce something called the knowledge. The knowledge. Ah, this looks like a knowledgeable man here. Taxi.
Not you again.
It's Mark from my Beatles London tour video.
Hi.
And what other sort of things do you need to know in the knowledge then?
Covers a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross Station. Hotels, museums, theatres, shops. And then you need to know the shortest route between any two given points in that 6-mile radius. That's what they're going to test you on. Every road, what's on them. We're in the Mall, you've got all these clubs down here, the Athenaeum, the Reform, the Oxford and Cambridge, the RAC. We'd never say, oh, take me to Birdcage Walk. They'd say, take me to the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, because they know if you know that building, then you'll know Birdcage Walk.
Joolz, le taxi, les va pas partout. Yeah, patent coca.
This is my original blue book, which the carriage office gave to me in 1983 when I started the knowledge. There's 468 runs in there in total.
What does Downing days mean?
No, Downing was the name of the examiner. That's who I had, Mr. Downing. You'll see Mr. Chalcott. So a lot of the cab drivers watching this will remember, oh, I remember him, he was good, he was bad, he was...
Oh yeah? Well, so you got Mr. Downing, Mr. Chalcott.
Yep.
Lippett.
Mr. Lippett.
Who was the worst one?
Allegedly in that days it was Mr. Shern, who had a haircut like me. Mr. Shern, but he was a gentleman when I had him. And there's been many studies. They found that the area of the brain known as the hippocampus is more developed in black cab drivers. It's hard to say this with a straight face, you know, but it actually is because of the amount of knowledge that you are taking in. They could absolutely ask you anything.
What's this on the left here? So we're at Regent's Park now?
Central London Mosque. So he could ask you this, take me from the Central London Mosque to the liberal Jewish synagogue, and you've got to tell him the shortest route between the 2 points. That's where Cat Stevens got married in there.
Did he really?
Yeah, he got married in there. Well, he was Yusuf then, wasn't he? As he still is.
This is what happens when you take a cab. This is why we decided to do Mark Le Taxi today, so that we wouldn't have to do...
Oh, that's a blinding song, that one, Joe Le Taxi, isn't it?
Vanessa Paradis.
Who was her husband?
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, so it'll be Joolz Le Taxi, a parody of Vanessa Paradis.
Yeah.
Joolz le taxi, c'est ma vie. Je dis tally-ho, quel bon guidage. Je suis comme ça.
Up. Thank you, driver. Now, one person who's always asking for a handsome cab is Sherlock Holmes. Would you call me a hansom, please, Mrs. Hudson?
You are very handsome, sir.
The hansom cabs were invented by a fella called Joseph Hansom in 1834. And it was smaller and faster, with the driver sitting on top of what the French called the cabriolet, which is why we call it a cab.
So these were called the hansom safety cabs. So safety had come into play a bit more now. They had a lower centre of gravity, so they could take the corners a bit faster. That's when this rule came in about having to have a bale of hay in the boot for the horse. And it wasn't actually abolished until about 1976. So technically, I'm not sure there was many cab drivers carrying bales of hay till 1976, but you had to have one in the boot.
I don't know if it's true, but I heard that a taxi driver is legally allowed, if he needs to relieve himself, he can just get out and go and piss against his back wheel. Is that right?
Well, only one? No, I'd use all four.
Stop the meter, please. I'm just going to head over there for a second. Did you ever watch that Jack the Ripper with Michael Caine? Do you remember that series? Do you remember? It was really good, that, although, strictly speaking, it wasn't very true to life. However, there was a taxi driver in it, a cab driver called John Charles Netley. In 1903, he died over here on this corner. You know how they tried to claim that the Duke of Clarence, the grandson of Queen Victoria, was Jack the Ripper? He had help from this cab driver whose name was John Charles Netley. Anyway, he must have been caning around this corner or something, and he fell off his horse and his head went under the wheels. John Charles Netley. It's weird that it was at Clarence Gate where this cab driver, who supposedly was helping the Duke of Clarence, died. But I think it's actually utter balls, and he had nothing to do with Jack the Ripper at all. He should have been wearing seatbelts, but actually, you don't have to wear seatbelts, do you, if you're taxi drivers?
No, you're not required. We've got an exemption. It's quite restrictive in there. I don't know how you would manage. It's 6'7".
6'6".
6'6". He's shrunk an inch.
Joolz a taxi.
Now, in 1906, the Public Carriage Office decided to introduce conditions of fitness so that taxis had to be suitable for the job. And one of the requirements was that it had to have a turning circle of 25 feet, which, by lucky hap, is the exact distance around the fountain over there at the Savoy Theatre.
This is where our turning circle comes from. That little roundabout there is the thing that laid the standard down all those years ago to be able to get around that roundabout. And this is the only road in this country where you drive in on the right.
It's an old tradition from the horse and carriage days. They used to come in for the theatre and they'd alight from the carriage on that side. The driver would open the carriage door behind him and they'd get off the carriage on that side and they'd continue the flow around this way. So they wouldn't get off the carriage and go around because it'd be too slow, it'd take too long. And then they just kept it and then it became law. It's legally you have to go on that side now. Because that was here before the hotel. See, the hotel wasn't
The
here.
Savoy Theatre,
Yeah.
right. The passenger would sit behind the driver on the right. Well, why would they? But not in the hansom cab. He just sat in the middle,
How
didn't
old do
he?
you think I am? But I wasn't alive back then.
The driver would be able to open the door for the passenger. That would make sense. Because you
We used to do it on the traditional, the FX4. I could put my hand out there on what they call the suicide doors, click the button and flip the door open.
Yeah, I like those. And that's the one that we all, if you say to someone, what is the iconic English
Cab. They won't choose this or one of the modern electrics or the Vito. They will point to a picture of the FX4 because they were around for about 40 years. My first cab was an FX4. They appeared in 1958. And the last one, that was produced in about 1997. It was the iconic one. You know, we all couldn't wait to get rid of them because the window, you had to pull it up and down like this. We didn't even have a winder, but they were a beautiful looking cab.
So how many can you get in now?
So these taxis can take 5 passengers. The newer electric ones and the bigger taxis can take 6. If I'm on the taxi rank and you walk up to me, I'm obliged to take you within a 12-mile radius of where that place is.
Why 12 miles?
So 12 miles, historically it's a kind of reasonable distance expected for a horse and carriage to go. I think is where that stems from.
And are there any exceptions?
So if you're drunk or aggressive, I can turn you down and say, I'm afraid not tonight, sir. You'll have to get the bus. If I have a previous appointment that I need to get to, that the journey will get me late. And then the last reason to turn you down is if you're that Joolz geezer off the YouTube.
Oh, that's charming.
Je dis tally ho.
This is the Theatre Royal Haymarket, and I think it was back in like 2012 when the Queen surprised everybody at a performance of One Man, Two Governors, when she showed up in a taxi. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, he owns a taxi cab, doesn't he?
Stephen Fry owns one, Noel Edmonds, Kate Moss, Arnie owns one, he'll be back.
Yeah, I think Kim Kardashian owns a taxi.
Kim Kardashian has revealed plans to relocate to the UK next month so she can begin studying for the London taxi exam, the knowledge. Passing the knowledge is something I've dreamed of since I was a little girl, says Kim Kardashian. I've been blessed with success in various fields, but I don't feel my life will be truly complete until I've memorised all 25,000 London streets within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross. Do you reckon Kim Kardashian's going to be able to do this? How long did it take you?
I don't know if she can. Well, she probably can if she's got the brain. It took me just over 2 years to do it.
2 years?
Yeah, 2 years and five or 6 months.
Hard work, man.
Yeah, so it takes a lot of commitment to do the knowledge.
And that's the best part about it.
It's freedom. You can do whatever you want, whenever you please. You can switch off, go home whenever you please. So it's just working for yourself, which is easy for you to maneuver with your kids and that, so
right.
It's just
hard at the moment though, I bet.
Well, there's no work, so pretty much spend most of our time sitting down here not doing anything. So. See, everyone's trying to stay fit.
Is it? Are these guys taxi drivers?
Yeah, they're all taxi drivers. They're trying to stay fit because there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
So we do a whole, I think it's 10 laps.
Sometimes I don't know whether you're supposed to tip or not. I think a lot of people would like to know if you're supposed to tip or not tip a taxi driver.
Well, traditionally, I think the majority of people do tip. I suppose 10% is pretty average. Yeah, look at that. Look at the amount of brass in there. It's come to that. Poor old me. Some of those are out of date. It's funny talking about tips. We're just opposite Her Majesty's Theatre. In 1984, sadly, that was where Tommy Cooper died. He died on the stage in there. Famously, there's a story about Tommy Cooper tipping. So he's got out, and he's, "Thank you, driver, have a drink on me," and he's put it in there and gone like that. So the driver, what we all do, we've driven down the road, and as soon as you're around the corner, you think, he's giving me a fiver, and the driver's pulled out a tea bag.
And another requirement that came in 1907 was the taximeter. And taxi comes from taxo, I charge, in Latin. Taxo, taxare, taxavi, taxitus. And a taximeter was a machine to measure how far you charge for a fare. In fact, that's where you get the word taxi from.
In the old style cabs, how to start the meter was there was a flag that was up, and that would show you for hire. As soon as somebody put their hand out to hail or to flag you down, that's where the saying comes from. You used to pull the flag down and that would start the meter.
I'm going to see if a tall person can drive a cab. Interestingly, the design of taxis was so that a man wearing a top hat could get inside the cab. So for me, in this bowler hat, this is perfectly accommodating. However, less can be said for the leg room.
When you wear that, that's much more uncomfortable.
This isn't against the law to imitate a taxi driver. Oh, well, now it makes it much worse.
Oh, the accent, where we go?
All right, mate, yeah.
The attitudes come now, look, this is it.
Okay, where do you want to go then? What, Brixton this time, all right, love? How many of you? Well, you never guess who I had in the back of my cab the other day. Is it time or is it distance?
It's a little bit of both. So if you're sitting in traffic stationary, as you tend to do a lot in London, then it's just going to be timed, maybe 20 pence every couple of minutes. There's a chart there in the back that explains everything.
I'll just set that meter there for you, shall I?
That's it. 320. Now, don't tell me these are overly expensive, because you've just got into a £70,000 taxi, purpose-built, for £3.20. So like Addison Lee, they're £8.45 minimum. Uber, they've got a minimum, and it's nowhere near that.
But I've heard another weird rule is that if someone pays you with a £50 note and you don't have the change, you're entitled to take that, and you don't have to give them change immediately, but you can post them their change to their address.
I'd love to see their face when I tell them that one.
All right, mate, yeah, where can I take you?
Can I go to the Strand, please?
No problem, mate, yeah, hop in.
Okay,
I'll take you there, no problems at all.
And off we go.
You know, there's a danger that these cabs might die out in a few years, what with Uber and driverless cars and all sorts. It's quite difficult for them to make a living. Hope they don't. Such an iconic part of London life. And I can actually fit inside one because I'm the right height. They're the right height for me.
This has got a built-in ramp. They've had to be wheelchair accessible for many years now. The disabled have been put at a huge disadvantage because if they hail you, you can't always stop where the person is. So it could be absolutely piddling down with rain and you just can't stop. Because now we've got all these cycle lanes in. We've now got reduced speed limits of 20 mile an hour. Cycling lanes aren't enough, you see, they still want the road. Like this guy, look, he's looking at his phone. When Transport for London took over in 2000, never any consultation, just steadily come down.
L'ombre de Joolz résonne, c'est la vie.
So this is the church of St Mary le Strand, where the first taxi rank was established. Now, it wasn't until 1634 when Captain John Bailey, who actually sailed with Sir Walter Raleigh, he decided, I know, I'm going to get some people together with some proper uniforms and position them here so people knew where to come and hail them from. The reason why he chose this place is because there was this big maypole here, not a flagpole like that, but it was about twice the height of that. And people used to come here on days of great festivities and dance around it, so he knew there would be a lot of customers for him here. But eventually that Oliver Cromwell, who was a real bag of joy, he tore down the maypole because everyone was enjoying it too much. He's such a misery guts. Let's see if we can find a taxi ourselves.
Juste le taxi, c'est ma vie. Je dis tally-ho, quel bon guidage. Je suis comme ça.
What a funny little place you're in here. There's
Yeah.
only room for one cab
This is
here.
one, this is the Horse's Tail. It used to be known when we were radio cabs, had two-way radios that say any cabs near the Horse's Tail. And if you were a new driver, you'd think, what the hell's he on about? And so, you know, the experienced drivers would say it's the little one cab rank at the top of Queensgate, which is where we are now. There's the Horse's Tail on that statue, just across the road from Benny Hill's flat, just
Oh,
there.
is that where Benny Hill used to
Yeah, there's a
live?
blue placard to him on the door just there.
Excellent.
So I think the idea of this one, as people come out the park, they can see the cab facing them with a light on.
Russell Square, please. Paula! Excellent! Taxi!
When the sun's out, it sparkles like rainbow glitter, but when it's like this, it's sort of metallic-y looking.
I mean, I'm trying to do a video about the iconic black taxi cabs.
Yeah,
I've got one full of advertising, another one that's pink.
Well, you can see that one from the International Space Station. No. That would be good for weddings, so like you do weddings with this.
Ascot, Ladies' Day, weddings.
Funerals. Perfect
I haven't
for a
done
funeral.
a funeral yet.
The pink cab.
Do you want to book up?
Some of the people I've had in the cab, I've had John Bon Jovi, but embarrassingly I thought it was Bryan Adams.
Tap Jamie Redknapp, Boris Becker, Cat Deely, Clint Eastwood. And he said, would you take me to the Cotswolds? I'd never been there.
You've got to be careful. You can hardly hear them coming, these, because he's here to charge his cab. Yeah. All electric.
We found a female cab driver, which is
you?
quite rare, but I think black cabs, pink cabs, blue cabs.
And look at me, a black man in a black-white cab.
Yeah, no.
It's called a black cab.
I think black man in a white black cab.
Yeah, they get confused sometimes when we drive the white ones.
Yeah.
They reckon probably they're not the same price, cost, and stuff like that.
What's your name?
They're all the same. My name is Ibrahim.
Any of you black cab drivers, explain to me why none of you have a black cab.
If I took this wrap off, this is actually black underneath.
Yeah, so is mine actually.
Yeah, There's certain parts of London, like the Royal Parks and round by the palaces, Buckingham Palace, that you are not allowed advertising boards. So this is the only way you can get an advert in any of the Royal Parks or the Royal Palaces. It's the only way you can do it, is to put an advert like this on a cab.
Now, I've talked about these a million times before in my videos, but back in 1875, Captain Armstrong, who was the editor of the Globe newspaper up in Fleet Street, he needed a cab, so he sent out one of his lackeys to go and hail one for him. But all the taxi drivers were in the pub keeping warm because it was the middle of winter, they were freezing cold. So he got together with the Earl of Shaftesbury and they came up with the idea of these cabman shelters. But you can't discuss politics in them, so don't mention the war. Unfortunately, this one is closed, so I'll have to leave it to vintage Joolz to tell you all about them. In the old days, before they drove taxis like this, they used to drive hansom cabs and they'd be out in all sorts of weather. So the Cabman Shelter Fund had all these places built so that they could get good and wholesome refreshments at moderate prices. 1 cup of tea with 18 sugars, please.
There's about 13 of them left, dotted around London. Got handrails along the side, and that was to tie the horse to.
Taxi drivers are the only ones who are allowed to sit inside, but we can go and take takeaway.
There is a famous story about Frank Sinatra, more or less opposite the Albert Hall, going in and having a cup of tea.
Did they let him inside? No, he's not a cab driver.
Would you turn him down?
The interesting thing about this particular one here in Temple, and it's quite appropriate that they've got all the building work going on, because back in the 1960s, a big company decided to build a massive hotel here. And what the stupid architect didn't realise was that the entrance to his big grand new hotel came out right in front of one of these cabman shelters, because no one had told him that actually these are Grade 2 listed buildings which have been here since 1880. In the end, the Cabman Shelter Fund agreed to just move the hut a few yards down the road in return for a contribution to their fund. This one famously is the one where Benny Hill used to come in here because he used to live around the corner, and also Winston Churchill. And normally you have to be a taxi driver in order to go into one, but I mean, who's turning away Winston Churchill? I mean, so he did actually get accepted. I don't believe he drove a cab, but he did used to come in here. I mean, he may have. The hansom cab, please, and don't spare the horses.
Have you had somebody throw up in your cab?
Yeah, lots of times. You say, you're right, if you want to be ill, let me know and I'll stop the cab. No, I wouldn't do it to you, I wouldn't do it to you. My uncle's a cab driver, they've all got uncles that are cab drivers, and then they go quiet after a while and you hear, and then you go, quick, get the window down, get the window down. And it's all down, going down the Mile End Road, and there's all puke coating every car behind me.
If they do that, they don't get in my cab, and women are actually worse than men.
Who said that as well? Well, I know.
And they say, she'll be all right, she won't be sick. Oh yeah, I've heard that one before.
I've had a guy defecate in the seat where you're sitting, actually.
Oh, wow. Thanks for that.
I think he had a problem. He didn't know. This young lad, he got in. And
I was wondering what that stain was.
I cleaned it, and then it still stunk, the thing. So it was getting busy, and people started hailing me, and I said, before you get in, can I tell you, someone's just changed a baby in there, it's up to you. They're going, we're late for the theatre. No, we've waited long enough for you as it is. And they get in and they go, oh, God.
Back when I was at Manchester University, my friend Adele from Wigan, she was quite badly behaved in a cab. She said one day she didn't want to pay for the cab, and instead when the guy said, oh, that's £10, please, she just dropped her pants, and you see this bit here. She just presented her front bottom into this bit here. She just went like that. She said, do you take this? To where the bloke was trying to take the money, and he just chucked her out. She was funny, Adele.
If it was me, I'd have looked at her and gone, you got nothing smaller? It's all right,
Je suis Joolz. Je suis très sexy.
It's closed, like everywhere, but this used to belong to Piers Morgan. Seems like a reasonable place to finish a video about taxis. There is a danger of black cabs dying out in London, so remember to encourage their use, use a black cab if you can, and keep this iconic English tradition alive. Cheers everybody, cheers Louisa, cheers Mark, cheers Mark, thanks for watching. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and follow me on my Instagram, which is @JoolzGuidesOfficial. And if you want a tour with Paula in a pink cab, or a Beatles tour of London with Mark in his cab, then check the text descriptions below. Cheers, cheers.
Cheers to all black cab
Cheers,
drivers.
cheers, guys.